Hey folks, on last week we discussed distractions as something that is expected and inevitable. However, they are manageable. We also discussed one of the greatest distractions, that being your smartphone. Today, in part two, we will discuss the biggest distraction, that is your mind, and how we can overcome the debilitating effects of something called mind chatter. Today, on Elevated Thinking, right after these messages. Well, good evening, my friends, and welcome to another live episode of Elevated Thinking. This is the place where we take practical principles and spiritual truths to develop meaningful solutions to your everyday problems. If this is your first time meeting me, my name is Mark, and I'm your host and the founder of Elevated Thinking Media. Now, if this is your first time tuning in, a very special hello and thank you for stopping by to check us out. This is an instructional series, but it's also a class environment where we do take your questions and I do appreciate your comments as long as they are on topic, respectful, and follow Facebook and YouTube guidelines, which of course is monitored by our wonderful moderator, Miss Kelly. Now, if you do have some questions, we only ask that you put a Q, a capital Q, in front of your question so that we can better distinguish it from the comments. All right? And speaking of the chat area, let's see who is there. Wow, okay, we've got JR in the room saying good afternoon, everyone. Today is April 2nd, 2023. It sure is. Glad to have you in the room, son. And then we've got Mom in the room. Good. Hi, Mark. God bless you. Is this April 2nd? Yeah, I believe it is. All right. Wonderful. Well, today, like I said, we're going to continue our series on dealing with issues of focus and concentration. So I definitely am excited to get to that. On last week, we didn't get a chance to finish up, but we're going to finish up some of the stuff from last week and then kind of move on forward. All right. And oh, Letha's in the room. She says, "Good everyone. Good to see you, Pastor Mark. Great job. I got a lot of it. Thank you so much. Do appreciate that." And Miss Maxine says, "Good evening, everyone, and good evening to you as well." All right. Good deal. Well, folks, if you are ready, let's get started with the class, shall we? All right. So, before we get into where we cut off from last week, let's take a quick moment to recap. All right. So, last week we discussed that distractions are an integral part of living. It's just a part of the human experience. All right. It's what we have to deal with. And we are, in fact, designed to deal with and to respond to those distractions. I believe I told you that distractions are not something that you necessarily can avoid, neither do you always want to avoid distractions. I think we talked about the fact that if you hear something fall or break or a baby crying or something of that nature, we want to be able to be alert enough to be able to respond, and the body has a natural alert system to be able to do that. So, distractions, however, even though they're part of our life, they can be managed. And that's what we want to do. We're not trying to eliminate distractions. We're simply trying to manage them. Last week, we also talked about one of the things that can really weigh us down, our mind, our thinking, and our emotions, is understanding the difference between caring for someone and carrying someone. So we want to make sure that we understand it's okay to care for people, but there's a breaking point, a cutoff point, if you will, where we go from caring for people to carrying them. And what we do is we invariably start carrying their weight and make their weight our weight, their problems our problems. We aren't designed to do that. We are only designed to carry the load that we have been given, the lot in life that we have dealt with. So those are some things that I wanted for us to focus on. So as we get into this, I want to make sure that there's no questions on last week about any of the things that we discussed. I know we kind of cut off abruptly, but I did want to take a moment to make sure that any of you all that were in the live stream on last week, if you had any questions or if you may have thought of something during the week, questions that you may have had, feel free to ask them. And as I always remind you, ask the questions at any time. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I'm talking about or because I'm just going to keep continuing on teaching. But you go ahead and ask your questions and we'll take the time to stop and to address it or your comments. We had a wonderful discussion on last week. So, all right, so let's move forward in this. So now we're going to be talking about managing the mind. And there are some areas of concern for managing our mind because our mind is where we actually focus at, correct? So, some things to deal with right there. If you're looking on your screen, we're dealing with things such as poor sleep hygiene can affect our ability to focus. Too much stress. There's the emphasis on there is on too much. And then we have health issues that can definitely affect our ability to focus. And then, of course, uh, I've got here suspension and uncertainty, but actually that should be suspicion, not suspension. So I missed that one, yes, but that should be suspicion and uncertainty. All right. Okay. Hey, Miss Elaine, so glad that you're here. Thanks for joining us this evening. All right. So these are the things that we want to try to deal with. I don't know how much of this we'll get through to tonight because the sleep hygiene, I definitely want to take some time to deal with that. So looking at sleep hygiene, um, the first of all, we call it sleep hygiene because sleep hygiene is just a field of study, a discipline whereby researchers do tremendous amount of research on sleep and people's sleep habits. Many times, this research is done with people in sleep laboratories. I don't know how many of you all have had a sleep study done, but I've had two or three sleep studies done because, of course, as you all know, I deal with sleep apnea. And I know others that have had it done. But a sleep study is great because it doesn't just tell you, if you have sleep apnea, it gives you a lot of other information about how exactly you sleep. So that's basically sleep hygiene. It's just some of the things that we should be doing in order to improve our sleep habits. Just like regular physical hygiene, where when we wake up in the morning, what do we brush our teeth, we wash ourselves, and we put on certain things, deodorant. That deals with hygiene. And so sleep hygiene is the same way. It is approaching our sleep in a way that prepares us for a full good night's sleep. So the CDC actually gives some recommendations on sleep hygiene, and we're going to look at a few of these, and I'll just kind of give you my opinion of some. You may not be able to do some of these, but at least try to do as many of these as possible. So number one is you want to be consistent about what? About what time you go to bed at night. So it says here that you want to go to bed at the same time each night and wake up the same time each morning, including weekends. Now, I know that many of us love to sleep in on the weekends, especially if we've worked all week long. But in reality, we should actually be going to sleep and waking up at the same time. Why? Because the body works on something called a circadian rhythms. And it's those circadian rhythms that regulate how long we sleep, what time we actually start to get sleepy, and what time we wake up in the morning. Ideally, now this is in a perfect world, we shouldn't need alarm clocks because our circadian rhythm is set to put us asleep at a certain time in the evening and to wake us up at a certain time. Unfortunately, life doesn't work that way, so we actually need alarm clocks because else we're going to be late for work or whatever else that we have to do. So the first thing we want to do is making sure that we're going to sleep at the same time at night and waking up at the same time in the morning. That's going to help to program our body to let us know that, let's say that our sleep time is 10 p.m. I'm just going to use that as a time. You start forcing yourself to wind down at about 9:15, 9:30, and get in that bed at 10 o'clock, shutting everything off that you can shut off, and waking up maybe, I don't know, at 6 a.m. in the morning. Once you do that, if you continue to do that for a couple of weeks, your body is actually going to begin to adjust to that. And what it will do, it will actually program your mind and your body to stay asleep in that period of time. The reason why we're waking up a lot of times at night is because our body doesn't know a full shutdown mode. And I was just thinking the other day, and I think I was talking to somebody. I don't know. I may have been talking to my wife about it, but I said, "Boy, I really miss those days as a kid growing up, living living with my mom." I mean, I just go to sleep at night, sleep all night, never worry about waking up in the middle of the night hardly. And when I get up in the morning, boy, I just feel refreshed and just ready to go and ready to tackle the day. Boy, that time ends really quick. In fact, I think it might have ended just before I became an adult. But I do miss those times, I tell you. But that's one of the things we can do. So let's move on. Good sleep hygiene also is making sure that your bedroom is properly prepared for sleep. So here the CDC is saying that make sure it's quiet, dark, relaxing, and a comfortable room temperature. All right. Now, some people will say that your bedroom should be slightly on the cool side, and I would tend to agree with that. Now, you'll have to judge things yourself and know what temperature works for you. But I know that one of the worst things you can do is sleep in a hot room. That's bad. I can't do it. Just make sure that the room is cool. And it's actually okay if if you make it kind of cool and then put on some blankets, like a blanket or a quilt or something, that's actually okay. You just need to make sure that the environment is cool. You don't have to be cold. You don't want to be cold going to sleep, but making sure that the room, some people are a little confused about that because they say my room's supposed to be cool, but I'm cold natured. Well, the room is cool, but you're under a blanket or a quilt or a comforter or something like that to help you to stay warm, and that will help to balance out your body temperature. All right, let me move this down here so I can see it. So, since my spine surgery, I've had a very hard time staying asleep. Um, I'm just curious. Do you mind just saying how long ago that was? Because that's kind of there's some reasons for that, and I know about that. Not necessarily spinal surgery, but surgeries in general are going to have a significant impact on sleep. There are some things to be done, but the reason why I'm kind of asking you a time frame is because i- if it's early in this after the surgery, there's not a whole lot you can do. Uh, and sometimes that get into the pain relievers, which I was actually going to talk about a little bit later on, pain medications and so forth. But just kind of let me know, and I'm going to come back and deal with that because that is part of something that I want to talk about under health and health issues is people who have had surgeries and people who are actually taking medications. So we'll deal with that very shortly there, Nisi. So making sure that your bedroom is good. Now, I want to add a little something to this because one thing that we want to make sure is that our room looks like it's a place to sleep. I know that in the day that we live in, a lot of us are working at home. Sometimes working at home requires that we set up a home office um, in our somewhere in our house, and some people don't have the luxury. I'm grateful for the home that we live in. I have my office in one room, my wife has her office, and so I'm grateful for those particular things. But everybody doesn't have that luxury, and sometimes they have to put their office in the bedroom. And one thing that you want to try to strive for is make sure that your bedroom looks like a place for sleeping, not a place for working or any other activity. When you walk in your bedroom, it should say a place to sleep. And that's very important because it'll see that. So, okay. So she says 2018, I'll sleep about 2 or 3 hours and you don't take the pain meds. So, one thing that I do know about certain surgeries, again, not specific with the type of surgery that you've had, but others that have had knee replacement surgery, also hip replacement surgery. I've heard many of them complain about not being able to actually get a full night's sleep. There's a couple of things that I'm going to refer to you, and one is to your not your not your specialist, but to your primary care physician. um, there are some non-medical things and treatments that actually can be done for people who have had very serious surgeries like that, structural surgeries in their body. And I would love to give you a little bit more on that subject, but I do know that doctors do have people that they can refer you to for the inability to be able to sleep, because some of those surgeries do alter some of the chemical compositions of our body and our mind. That I do know. And that's some information that I was able to get from the National Institute of Health, that a lot of people do complain about that. But they say there are some non medical treatments that can be done. And if I get a little time here, I'll see if I can actually pull up my notes and show you some of that information. All right. But yeah, that can be a real tough issue. But making sure that your room just looks like it's ready for sleep, or even your area. Some people live in very small spaces, efficiency spaces, but at least where your bed is at, try to make it look like it's a place for sleeping. Some people will actually do candles. Now, again, I'm being very cautious about that. I don't need nobody going and burning down their house trying to burn some candles. you know, it's kind of relaxing. But there are other things you can do, such as aromatherapy with oils and waxes that can actually be warmed up by a small light bulb. But I think that's actually in another slide, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. All right, so I definitely don't want to do that. Let's move on. The other thing that the CDC recommends is that you remove electronic devices such as TVs, computers, smartphones from your bedroom. Now, this is an area that's a little bit questionable because we all don't have the ability to be able to do that. But boy, that would sure be ideal if we could really get rid of that stuff out of our bedroom. But I will say this in all fairness, some people actually need some noise in order to be able to go to sleep. And science has shown that this may be necessary in many cases. I know I cannot go to sleep in a completely quiet room. I have to have some type of noise. Now, what some people do, and I don't know how many of you out there like to leave the TV on maybe a little bit low at night when you go to sleep. It actually helps you to sleep as long as it's not too loud. It actually helps you to be able to relax and calm down to go to sleep. I think one of the reasons for this is because we live in a very noisy society. And where we live not far from the highway. So we get the chance to hear I call it the opportunity to hear a lot of traffic and noise. So, in order to offset that noise, you have to have some other kind of noise that will cancel out the rumble of cars and trucks on the highway. Sometimes your house has noises in them, and you need some kind of way to balance out those particular noises. Um, the third thing is all of you may not deal with this, but some of us deal with something called tinnitus, which is a slight ringing in the ear. Some people have it worse than others. With that ringing that happens in the ear, I mean, if you lay down in a quiet room, all you're hearing is that high pitched ringing noise in your ears. And I tell you that noise sometimes it can get so loud, that, just I mean, it just really makes you want to scream out sometimes. And so what helps for me is I will either put in some earbuds that are somewhat made for sleeping, and I'll put in some different music and that sort of thing there. But I'm getting ahead of myself again on that one. Uh, so Miss Maxine says she has noises too. And yeah, so it's just natural for that, especially if you live in a new house. You said I needed to be dark and no sound in my room. Exactly. And Letha, that's actually the ideal way to be able to go to sleep. If you can do that in that environment, that's the best way. And I'm going to come back to you in just a moment because I want to use that to let people know how the body works with that. So mom says, yes, I need TV real low. So again, everybody's different. This is why I don't want to present number three in sleep hygiene as some hard set rules because everybody is different in how they're able, to manage their sleep. So going back to what Letha said when she said I needed to be dark, there's a reason why researchers, especially those in the area of sleep science, say that the room should be dark. Because in the base of your head, y'all know I love to talk about the anatomy of the brain, right? Never a time I can go with not talking about the brain. But in the base of the brain is a small gland called the pituitary gland. And that pituitary gland is not only regulates with growth, but it's also attached to another gland that deals with our ability to be able to rest and sleep at night. So what happens is that when the room gets dark and we close our eyes and we close out the light, that's actually when our ability to be able to sleep sort of comes alive. And not only that, when the room is dark and we close our eyes, or if there's some light, sometimes some of us use a sleep mask to be able to block out the light. That actually activates a natural chemical in your body called melatonin. We're going to talk a little bit about melatonin supplements a little bit later on in this program. But that really activates that melatonin, which helps you not only to get to sleep, but to stay asleep. So this is one of the reasons why they really recommend that the room be dark, cool, and quiet. So that way the body can uh, repair itself. She says, pull the cover over my head. I know people that do that. I'm not a cover over the head person. Normally, if I put the cover over my head, it's because my head is cold. But I found a way to mitigate that too. I use something that looks like a stocking cap. It's not a stocking, but it just looks like it. But other than that, I used to use that to pull over my head, but I can't do it. And unfortunately, with me, I'm working with a CPAP machine, so I got that mask on my face looking like Darth Vader out of Star Wars. So it's hard for me to pull up stuff, but I would love to pull the covers up because it seemed like to me when you pull the covers up over your head, you just shut the whole world out. And sometimes that's the only way some people can go to sleep. So yeah, I get that. So um, let me. I'm going to move on because, like I said, I don't want to get ahead of myself here. The number four is to avoid large meals. Definitely want to do that. Avoid caffeine. Wow, and avoid alcohol before bedtime. Here's the thing about eating late. So let's just say, for example, you want to eat your dinner at, I don't know, let's say 9 o'clock. We'll make it like that. Your bedtime is normally 10 o'clock. You eat a heavy meal at 9. Now I know many of us thinking like, boy, if I do that, I gotta, my stomach's gonna be full because you know how you feel after you eat, especially after you eat quite a bit. Most of us eat a little bit more than, you know, what we should because, and here's the reason, not because we're gluttonous. We eat more because we eat so fast as Americans that we don't have time for the stomach to send a brain to send a signal to the brain is what I'm trying to say, that, hey, I'm full. It actually takes time for that signal from the stomach to the brain to be transmitted. So a lot of times we end up overeating because while we're eating, we're still feeling hungry. but a lot of times we end up overeating, especially as Americans. And what happens is when we start eating, the food starts going through a digestion process. If you eat and then lay down and go to sleep, you're going to have your blood pressure's going to be slightly elevated. I'm not talking about high blood pressure, hypertension, but your blood pressure is going to be elevated slightly. Your pulse rate is going to be elevated slightly. Your respiratory rate is going to be elevated. Why? Because these are the three things that are necessary for digestion. So if you eat right before you go to sleep, you're not going to be able to get to sleep. Or if you do get to sleep because you're so exhausted, you're going to end up possibly taking a risk and having to deal with what we call nightmares or sleep paralysis is the word that I'm trying to say. Sleep paralysis. Remember last week I told you sleep paralysis is that phenomenon when you feel like you're dreaming, but you're actually in your room and you can see everything around you, but your body can't move at all. But it feels like something's coming after you. It sounds like everything is so much louder in there. That's sleep paralysis. And that happens for a number of reasons, but it can also be triggered by eating just before going to bed. So you want to make sure that you cut off your meals at least 2 hours before it's time for you to go to sleep. And even that 2 hour period, we're not talking a heavy meal, we're talking a light meal. If you're eating a full blown dinner, you want to try to have that done at least by 6 o'clock. If, for example, your bedtime is 10 o'clock. In fact, a new sleep report has been released that confirms that now they want people to finish their last meal by 5 o'clock. Now, I don't know what people can finish their last meal at 5 o'clock when most people get off work about 5 o'clock. So I'm not sure how they're calculating that. Um, yeah, I don't know too many people that, unless they go in and work a kind of a different shift, most people get off work 5 o'clock. Folks are not getting home till 6:30, 7 o'clock, and then trying to put something together to eat. So I'm not sure how that is, but you do want to try to space your eating as far as away you can for sleeping. So, yeah. And she says some people take melatonin to help them to rest, and we're going to deal with that. I appreciate you bringing that up because we're definitely going to deal with that and talk about that just a little bit. But yeah, you want to make sure that you eat as early as you possibly can, just to make sure that your food has fully digested before laying down and going to bed. And this also brings up another thing called that late night snacking. I might be stepping on some toes here because I'm sure there's people that do that. There's a lot of people that do late night snacking. Here's the thing. If you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, for some reason, something wakes you up, maybe a noise, you get up and go use the restroom. Some people have this tendency that they want to go to the kitchen and get a snack. I'm telling you, try to avoid doing that because as soon as you eat that food and lay back down, what's going to happen again? The process of digestion. Digestion is going to happen again. And then you might not get a sleep for another hour or hour and a half. So you just might want to try to avoid that. Caffeine is a definite no-no. The cutoff time for caffeine for most people is going to be 1 o'clock p.m. That is 1 o'clock afternoon. I'm stressing that because there might be some people that used to be like I used to be. I was a coffee addict. I drink tea a lot now, and if I have coffee, I only have 1 cup of coffee early in the morning, but I do drink a lot of tea, and it's non-caffeine tea. It's mostly herbal tea. But I was addicted to coffee at one time in my life because when you work third shift or you work second shift or you work these crazy shifts that these jobs used to make you work, you learn how to drink coffee. And I was addicted to coffee. So it was nothing for me to have a cup of coffee right while I'm going to bed. I mean, literally make a cup of coffee and have it on my nightstand and laying down and sipping the coffee. Can you believe that? just before going to sleep. I, Lord, I wish I'd had a little more understanding in those days, the understanding that I have now. But with caffeine, you definitely want to cut that off right around lunchtime, 1 o'clock p.m. at the latest. The reason being is that caffeine stays in most people's systems for 4 to 6 hours. You want to make sure that that caffeine is completely out of your system before it's time for you to wind down and go to sleep. So if you're one of those people that like to have an evening cup of coffee, I mean, I'm just letting you know that that's really not helping for your sleep hygiene. Now, every now and then, I don't see where it's a big problem because sometimes you may go out and have a nice dinner at a nice restaurant, and you know how they like to come out with a little cup of coffee to serve you. Look, I'm just being honest with you. I'm going to drink it, especially if it's the weekend. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to be like, well, I'll just sleep later. But that, again, we're not talking about every now and then just enjoying something. We're talking about hygiene, which is a habit. So definitely avoid coffee and alcohol before bedtime. Some people believe that having a little bit of wine or having another type of spirit will help them to relax and go to sleep. Well, part of that is true. The alcohol will help you to relax, but unfortunately, it's also going to mess with your metabolic rate. It's going to mess with your chemical systems in your body that require you to go to sleep. And what will happen is you may get to sleep. This is the effect of alcohol. You may get to sleep quick, but you're also going to wake up and break your sleep cycle. So that's why it's not good to have these three or these things before bedtime. Before I go any further, are there any other questions? Let me scroll down here and make sure. Um, okay. So again, any questions, just let me know. All right. So number 4, get some exercise. All right. But not right before bedtime. I know there were some people that were talking about exercising right before they go to bed because what they want to do, the theory was, if I tire myself out, then I'll be able to go to sleep. I know that sounds logical, but unfortunately, your body just does not work that way. If you exercise right before going to bed, yes, you will be tired. You will be exhausted. But remember, your blood pressure is slightly elevated, your pulse rate is elevated, your respiratory rate is elevated. All of the things that need to be calm in order for you to be able to go to sleep. So, exercise that I'm talking about is walking, light, moderate exercise. Maybe if you're in better shape than I am, maybe going for a jog. I can only walk at this point, but I guarantee you sometime during this year, I'm going to be able to jog again because I'm working on me. Somebody used to say in church, I'm working on the building. Mark is working on his building, so I'm building myself up. But I am walking. I try to walk at least a couple of times a week. I'm going to build that up more and more. But definitely exercise sometime during the day. Just make sure that your exercise, according to sleep hygienists, your exercise should cut off 2 to 3 hours before it's time for you to go to sleep. This allows for your blood pressure to come down, your pulse rate, and your respiratory rate as well. All right. Now, here are some things that I have added to this list, research that I've done over the years. One of the things is listening to soft music for sleeping. All right. So this is one thing that I have advocated. And I even heard a few weeks ago, I just happened to be listening to Bishop Jakes on YouTube. He comes on live every Sunday morning. And I just happened to be listening to him a few weeks ago. And he even admitted that he's gotten into the thing where he uses his earbuds and listens to soft, relaxing music before going to bed or actually while laying down. But here's what I would suggest. Again, that half-hour wind down period. So again, we're pretending that our bedtime's 10 o'clock. The wind down period starts at 9:30. I would start by actually putting the earbuds in then, relaxing, maybe getting a book to read, some a book that is relaxing, not something that's going to stir you up emotionally. That's a time to go ahead and lay the phone down, lay the Facebook, the Instagram, TikTok and all the other wonderful things that entertain us during the day. Now it's time to pull out a book, listen to our music, and relax. And what kind of music should I listen to? Well, I'm going to give you a great place to go. A great resource is YouTube. Some of you might be watching me on YouTube right now, but YouTube is a great resource. The thing I like about it is all you have to do is type in relaxing music, and no less than two or 300 options for music you can listen to. And the nice thing about it is these people have taken the time to make sure that the music will last for 3 hours, 4 hours, and as much as 8 hours of music. So no matter how long you sleep, there's an option there on YouTube for you to listen to relaxing, calming music while you are trying to go to sleep. And it needs to be relaxing. I know some people say, well, I love my gospel music. Well, now come on, look who you're dealing with. Nobody don't love gospel music any more than I do. I spent my life playing gospel music, so I love gospel music. But I'm sorry, listening to Dorothy Norwood trying to go to sleep, listening to Shirley Caesar trying to go to sleep, listening to John P. Key sing Jesus is Real, I know. For me, that's not going to put me to sleep. That's going to put me in dance mode because I'm going to have to get up and move around the house because y'all know how I am. Listening to music like that will get me stirred up and going. But if you listen to quiet stuff, and all you say, just type on there music for sleep, and you will find out so much about so many different options with that. So let's look up here. Okay, Miss Lena says, how about doing leg and exercises laying down? Absolutely. Absolutely. One thing that I have been trying to encourage my middle-aged people and older is to do leg exercises while you are laying down. This is so important as you cross over that 50-something divide is extremely, extremely important. But not only for that age group, I encourage the age group between 30 and 50 to do exercises in the bed even before you get out of the bed. A lot of times this will help to prevent injury. I've had people in their late 20s talking about they got out of bed and hurt themselves. And they're just wondering like, I'm too young for that. No, you're not. No, you're not. You need to begin to stretch those muscles that have been contracted. But in relationship to what you're talking about, those exercises laying down are wonderful. First of all, what they're going to do is they're going to improve your circulation. So I hope everyone's listening because that was a great point that she made. They help to improve circulation. Okay. The next thing they do is help improve mobility. So the mobility between your joints is extremely important, especially as you cross over about 35, 40 years of age. So that's going to be important to you. The other thing is going to improve flexibility. One thing that medical, not med, well, I say medical doctors, but sports doctors is what I'm trying to say. One thing that sports doctors have identified is that stretching actually helps to maintain your mobility as you get into your elder years. So doing those leg exercises in bed, good for everybody. Everybody. We all should do that. Stretch before you get out. I mean, as soon as you wake up in the morning, stretch those arms up in the air and stretch them out wide and turn your back a few times while laying down now. Because for me, when I stretch for getting out of bed, of course, I'm at the age where I hear snap, crackle, and pop. It's like that cereal, snap, crackle, and pop. And I try to remember, I don't do it all the time, but I'm trying to get into the habit of doing those exercises because they're going to help you. But doing that stretching just before bed is also relaxing as well. So that's a good point. Oh, she says here, I listen to the rain. Now, let me ask you, so are you listening to the rain like through an app or through um, YouTube or through iTunes or something like that? I'm just curious what method you are using to listen to rain. Because if you go on YouTube, and I was talking about, getting relaxing music, you can also listen to just relaxing sound effects. So it doesn't have to necessarily be music. You can listen to the rainfall for 6, 7 hours. You can listen to a light thunderstorm. Some people like that, listen to a thunderstorm while trying to sleep. They got all of that on YouTube. And if you are an iPhone user, an Apple user, iTunes has all the stuff that you need for that. And I tell you, I use it virtually every night that I go to sleep. I put my earbuds in or I put my headphones on and I lay down and I try to relax my mind. Music is probably the most powerful tool to be able to relax your mind. And so that's a good thing. So she says YouTube. So see, already I've got somebody that's verified what I'm telling you all. YouTube is a great resource. YouTube should pay me for promoting them right now, but it's okay. It's not about that. It's about giving you all good information. So definitely music, and I want to move on because the time is moving on. So um, one of the things, let's see, she says, I sleep good when it's storming outside. Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because sometimes you go to sleep at night and everything is fine. You wake up in the morning, you don't know anything. You go to look outside, the street is all wet, your car is wet. And then you get to work or get to the store or somebody's house, they say, ooh, that was some storm last night. And you're looking at them like, it stormed? I didn't know. I don't know what it is. I haven't done enough research on that, but sometimes just that gentle rain and the thunderstorm, sometimes it's just so soothing it just lulls you right to sleep or helps keep you asleep. So, um, so moving on here, consider aromatherapy. Okay, so I talked about candles. Some people back in the day used to use candles, the scented candles, to help them sleep. I'm not recommending candles. They are a fire hazard. If you already use them and know how to use them, that's fine. But for those of you who don't use them, I'm not going to recommend that you use candles for aromatherapy. You can use wax for aromatherapy. So at Walmart, I believe you can go and get this little aromatherapy kit. It is just a jar that's about that big around. Let me get in the camera. So you see, it's about that big around. And it has a light bulb at the bottom of it and just plugs into the wall. And then it has a little lid that sits on top of it. They sell the wax there and they sell it in all different kinds of aromas. And one of the good aromas for sleeping and relaxing is lavender. Lavender has really shown how its effectiveness in helping people to relax and go to sleep. Lavender has also been effective in people recovering from injury and surgeries. So, also consider that as well. But remember, anything that you do, if you feel like it's going to affect a condition in your body, please check with your primary care physician, your internal medicine doctor, excuse me, just to make sure that it's okay for that. But for most people, aromatherapy is a great thing. You put it in there, it's completely safe. Once you lay the wax inside of it, it heats up. I don't know how many of you is there anybody here that's ever tried using those wax cubes for aromatherapy? Because they absolutely work wonderful. They smell great. It's not overpowering or anything like that, but it really does help to relax you. Yeah, I see some people do use that. So make that a consideration. So now here I want you to also think about melatonin. Now melatonin doesn't work for everybody, okay? And sometimes you have to sort of play with the dosage of how much melatonin to take. But this is where I'm going to kind of take a little bit of a cautious approach because if you are a person that is taking regular medications and you've never taken melatonin before, I would ask that you would consult your physician before you start taking any supplement, including something like melatonin. Now, the National Institute of Health talks about melatonin, and it says that for the most part, it sees that it's safe for most people to take. And even when people decide to take higher doses of melatonin, they said that right now there's really not a lot of information out there that shows that it could be detrimental to your health to do so. But they do caution people who are taking blood thinners or who are taking medication for one other condition. I can't remember it right now. But I do know those that are on blood thinners, those that are taking things like Coumadin and so forth, they want you to avoid the melatonin. And I think it's for some different reasons. And I think also if you're on MOAI inhibitors, you also want to be cautious of that. But I have taken melatonin. And I do take other medications that I've been prescribed, but I've taken melatonin. I've not had any adverse effect from it, but I will tell you, it does help. I believe it does help. So you might want to consider a melatonin supplement. But again, do your own research. I'm not acting as a doctor here, but it is something that you should consider. Melatonin does help. Again, like I said earlier, that is something that is naturally produced by the body. There are some cases where doctors may find out that you're not producing quite enough melatonin, in which case they may go ahead and put you on a supplement. But sometimes that little extra boost of melatonin may help to do that. Now, having said that about melatonin for sleep, I do know that there are people that do use sleeping aids to help them sleep, both over the counter and those that are prescribed. If you use that kind of stuff, that's fine. I'm not going to say anything about that. So, oh yeah, my wife says, she says I use them too. Yeah, they do work. Yeah, the melatonin does work. It's really good, and out of all the supplements, it's one of the safest. So I kind of like that. But anyway, just speaking of sleeping aids, I know they sell over-the-counter sleeping aids. And I know that you can also go to your physician and get a sleeping aid if you're having trouble with that. The thing about sleeping aids that I would just warn you is this. Number one, the sleeping aid is not a replacement for dealing with whatever you've got going on that's keeping you from sleeping. The sleeping aid is supposed to be temporary, not a permanent solution. So if you find that you're using it for an extended period of time, you may want to talk with your doctor and find out exactly what's going on. Maybe they need to do a blood panel or just some other things. But yeah, sleeping aids, I don't always recommend them because sometimes they can have some different effects, that some undesirable effects. But again, if it's something that you've been using, hey, do you? And that's fine. The other thing too that I want to let people know is be careful about using over-the-counter medications that were designed for another thing for sleeping. I know we've done it, but it's really, again, not something that we should do long term. Because here's the thing, you don't want medications in your body that you don't need at that time. Okay? So consider that as well. Now, moving on with that, with the medication, there are some medications over the counter that we may take for certain conditions where our doctor has actually prescribed for us. Like I take Zyrtec for allergies. I know there's a lot of people that deal with allergies. I deal with allergies. I know boatloads of people that deal with them. And so the doctor will prescribe Zyrtec. Well, Zyrtec at this point is over the counter. I believe at one point many years ago, it was only by prescription, but now Zyrtec is over the counter. And, my doctor will just simply, he won't write out a prescription, but he'll just, write on a note, like get some over the counter Zyrtec. Now, two doctors have done this for me, especially both of my sleep doctors. And they will always tell me, they'll say, now look, it says that Zyrtec is non-drowsy, right? And how many of you know it says it right on the box, non-drowsy formula. I don't know about you, and even my doctor told me he takes Zyrtec, and he said Zyrtec puts him right to sleep. As soon as he takes it, it puts him to sleep. So we do know there are medications that do kind of put you to sleep. What I'm saying about those medications, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because if you are taking a medication that you know that does cause a drowsy effect, it would be suggested that you take that before going to bed unless your doctor has advised you otherwise. But I know my doctor and another doctor that I've had always said anytime you're dealing with medications that's going to make you sleepy, try to take those right before bed. Maybe that 9:30 period if you have that option. Let me even go a little deeper than that. Some of us take medications, some people take medications that either contain a diuretic or are diuretics. Diuretics can definitely affect your sleep. I've talked with 3 doctors about this, and all 3 doctors say that they always advise their patients to take the diuretics during the day. Unless you have a special condition of which you need to take it at night, please stick with what your doctor tells you. But if you don't have any stipulations, you might want to consider taking that because that can interrupt your sleep as well. So there are a number of medications that can interrupt sleep. And here's what I would suggest. If you want to know more about your medication, you can go to 2 places I go to. One is called webmd.com. The other one is called drugs.com. I know that sounds like a bad name for a website, but trust me, it's run by doctors and medical experts. These are 2 websites that I've trusted over more than a decade. WebMD is a great resource. They are attached to a very prominent medical center, the Cleveland Institute, which you know was a world-renowned institute. They have some of the best doctors that are there. I had one doctor that produced articles for it, but I use WebMD to look up medications. One of the things that I want to find out is whether it's over the counter or whether my doctor has prescribed it for me. I want to know when is the best time to take it because I don't want the medicine to affect my sleep pattern if I'm already struggling. So maybe that's something you might want to do for those of you who take medications. Just take time to research it. You may find information that says if you take your medication a little early, it might have less effect on your sleep. So those are some things to consider with that. All right. Are there any questions about any of this? The music therapy, as I like to call it, the aromatherapy, melatonin, our discussion here with medications. Any questions? Oh, she said, we need not take other people's medicine, especially if it's not prescribed for you. Thank you very much. That is critical and important. And you know what people also don't understand too? Even if you think it's a medication that you take, you got to be careful because their medicine may be dosed differently than your medication. And it may have a different composition than other medications too. So that's never a good ideal. Okay, so she said they tried that when I wouldn't take the Ambien. They tried that when I wouldn't take the Ambien. It helps to get relaxed to sleep. So, okay, so you're saying that the melatonin does help you um, with that. And so that's good. That's good. Sometimes it's a matter of finding what works for you. And I think that's the point that I want to make is all of this information I've given you is for you to take it, assimilate it, think about it, research it out, and find out what works for you. We are not carbon copies. What works for me may not exactly work for you. And so I like to put a lot of information out there so you're able to actually go and to utilize it. So I don't make melatonin, but I do use aromatherapy with scented wax, very relaxing. Yeah. So yeah, I like the aromatherapy. I think it works good. One thing that I also do, and I didn't even mention this, is You can't see what's in the cup, but it's chamomile tea. Chamomile tea is known to be a soothing tea, a relaxing tea. In addition to that, there are some chamomile teas that also have lavender in them, and I will use those from time to time. The, it really depends on how often I can find it. Now, something like this, if I am going to have a cup of tea before bed, again, it's going to be that 9:30 hour, that half hour before it's time for me to go to sleep. So, drinking a cup of chamomile tea, listening to some soft music, reading a book, that really puts you in the mindset of being going to go to sleep. Hopefully, you've already put your phone on silent. Remember that from last week when I said put your phone on silent? So hopefully you've done that before you start your uh, sleep routine. All right. So, but yeah, tea is great. And again, make sure it's herbal. Make sure that when you go to the store, it says non-caffeine. And speaking of non-caffeine, on a side note, and then we'll kind of end here. Um, there's things called decaffeinated. I hope you do understand that decaffeinated still has a small amount of caffeine in it. And I say that only for people who have a caffeine sensitivity. So just because you get something that's decaffeinated, remember it's something that's been stripped away, but it still has a little residue of caffeine in there. So that's something that you may want to think about as well. All right. Are there any other questions or comments? I feel like it's been a very productive discussion. You all have given me some great information yourself, and I thank you for being open and candid about your own life. I know I don't mind being candid about my life. My life's an open book, but I appreciate you all being candid about your life for one purpose. You know that if you're dealing with something, there's somebody else that's too scared to say something that's also dealing with the same issue. So by us being able to open up and share, I think we're being a blessing um, to a lot of people. All right. So it says tea will sneak up on you, so I'm careful about which ones. Yes, yes, indeed. I am a teetotaler, so I consider myself a semi-expert in teas. I rarely use that word with myself, but yes, you have to be careful. If you get the wrong tea, it will sneak up on you. So yeah, you have to be careful with that. All right. So in any case, I do appreciate you all's input, those sorts of things. And we're going to get out of here. But just before we do, I want to thank you all for those of you all who regularly contribute to Elevated Thinking Media. Really appreciate it. Very helpful. Those of you who all gave last week, thank you so much. And want to give others of you an opportunity, if you are able to contribute to this work. It is so greatly appreciated. The Cash App is $Mark P. Forrest Sr. All right. Again, thank you so much for your support. Okay. Appreciate each and every one of you very, very much. All right. And when we get out of here, yeah, it's time to go. Thank you so much, Letha. So I want you to have a great week. And remember, in everything that you do, always elevate your thinking. God bless.